All right, so I want to welcome everyone to the first edition of Output Sports Inside the Room series. The goal of this is to peel back the doors of programming, utilizing output for the betterment of their student athletes, but while we also look into the lives of the coaches leading those rooms. I'm your host, Kyle Jacksic, Director of Athletic Performance at Charlotte Christian School, as well as the high school contributor here at Output Sports. Today, I'm extremely excited to be opening up the series with one of my best friends in the field, John Martin, current sports performance coordinator, assistant athletic director at Queensbury High School in New York. John, thank you for joining us today. Give the people a sense of what your day-to-day looks like right now for you.
KJ, it is my greatest pleasure to be here. But I will start with this. For me, day to day, obviously I'm thankful to have a pretty structured schedule, which is nice. Obviously, a pretty loose schedule during my day. We actually implemented a zero block class. So we have a group of students who come in before school, which is really our high performance class. Because of my current setting on our current role, I do actually teach a Gen Pop Phys Ed class, which is for me, it's a nice mix up. Getting to work with obviously a lot of our students, just see our student population, obviously especially our younger group, getting to work with freshmen coming to the building, which they don't have the opportunity right now really during the day to get strength and conditioning within their field unless they're in a sport. So after that, I have a little bit of time. Usually that's when my athletic trainer and I, we tend to meet. Obviously for me, tend to review data during that time. And then for me, the big hit usually comes with our fourth block, which is, around like 12:30 to 2 o'clock. And then we have our after school segment, which is a open weight room, which we hold as our athletic development program. So all of our off-season athletes. And then from about 2:45 till whenever, really rolls into what is our in-season programs. Try to get our teams, who obviously have in-season requirements, whether it be practices, whether it be games, scrimmages, making sure that flexibility of their schedule kind of fits within, the bounds of our program as of now. So as far as day to day goes, like I said, it really doesn't fluctuate that much. And then for me, obviously, I kind of hold a couple different responsibilities, where it be oversighting, our turf field, kind of managing, communicating. But then, like I said, that's all just inner working logistics.
So, like with those high school athletes, especially like for that after school portion, is that just kind of like come and go, like as you please kind of model, just kind of like an open room, or do you have like set team times that you're kind of like working through?
Yeah, so like I said, we have kind of broken down into two parts. So we have 2 to 2:45, which is a little more unstructured, if you will, in terms of, student athletes who will come and go. Most of the time, that is our either kids who are working through a specific program, or kids who are in their off season. They're not in their sport right now, which one of the things that's obviously a tough, life work balance with strength and conditioning at the high school level, as I'm sure you know, is having multiple sport athletes, navigating their programs, keeping them obviously trying to optimize performance, but yet also giving them days off for rest. So it's kind of nice that 2 to 2:45 for me is really our off-season program, where we really can kind of dive into a lot of different things. Like I said, it is structured. We have coaches who help support it, coaches who will help kind of come and facilitate it as far as just making sure that their kids are showing up. But I see a lot of the same clientele, but the clientele will fluctuate. After that 2:45 window, that is a very structured. We have about 35-minute windows that we kind of segment out for all of our in-season teams. And for the most part, a lot of those teams are on a very similar type schedule, but obviously just kind of rotates through. So like for me, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays right now is all track and field. Our track and field breaks up into about 5 different groups, because of obviously the nature of track, the size of track, and then usually, like I said, well, I'll maybe throw a baseball or softball in there on the end of it. Lacrosses are usually Tuesdays and Thursdays, just because the way their schedule gets dictated. But as far as, like I said, that after school, that is when it's the most refined schedule for actually trying to implement programming.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what COVID created for a lot of coaches was that consistent scheduling. So like I know like for us, like the majority of our games, especially for our spring sports right now, are Tuesday, Thursday. So I'm saying like,
Mm.
hey, in season day, Monday, Wednesday, like that's pretty heavy in the weight room, like we're trying to churn out like in season athletes, and then like all the off season athletes, really it's like Tuesday, Thursday. But that's also nice, like for me personally, where I can go out to the fields on Tuesdays and Thursdays because we're lighter in the weight room. So I'm like, I can actually go see our kids compete. Because I think that was something that I failed at my last school because we were so busy, because we were so large that I never really saw our kids on the sport field like enjoying their time and really like seeing like performance like come to fruition too. So I definitely
Yeah,
like having consistency in
I
team schedules in the grand scheme of things is big from the
Yeah,
performance.
and I agree with that. It's huge to see the kids perform. Last night, I actually was at our boys ice hockey team banquet. I was the guest speaker. So, when you take time to get into programs and communities and actually kind of see how those kids are doing on the field, that one, it's the cool aspect of sport performance. That's why we're here essentially, is to see those kids compete, elevate their performances. But two, it also is just kind of nice to kind of be there and support them. And obviously, in my field, obviously for us, when we get into postseason play, I travel with all of our teams as well. So, like I said, we were out in Buffalo for pretty much 4 days at the end of the winter season for our ice hockey team because they were in the state finals, which is a cool aspect. Like you really kind of get to get intimate time with those kids to really work with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Sunny and warm Buffalo, New York. Um, Quite a vacation spot.
Oh, it's beautiful in March. Are you kidding me? Driving home in a snowstorm? That's just what I want to do.
Yeah. So let's get into programming some. So talk to us about kind of like the major focuses of your program, both from like the X's and O side, but then also from a personality, emotional aspect. Like what are you trying to create for your athletes?
Yeah, I think, I think in the high school setting, especially in my situation, so I am the first sport performance coach here at Queensbury. They had a chance to hire. Now, there have been other coaches that obviously facilitated their teams through the weight room. But I think in doing that, one of the things we tried to break was a little bit of a stereotype methodology of really trying to get kids to understand that, hey, sport performance is 9-12, male, female, all athletes really trying to look at, really in the basic sense, is long-term athletic development. Is really trying to understand, where our kids are now, in a business assessment, a good foundation. And then for them, hey, how can we kind of slowly over the course of time, put the kids in the slow cooker and just say, hey, our goals over the next 4 years, 5 years, depending on, some of our athletes who may be starting at their eighth grade level, giving them an opportunity to come in and trying to compete, but also trying to optimize that performance and really also creating content knowledge. I think that's been a huge aspect for culture of our room. That's been a huge aspect. And, we've seen some amazing things kind of come of it. A lot of it being more so from our female athletes. I think, at this point in time, our female really blossoming simply for the fact that this is all new to them. They're excited about it, and obviously now this has been 6 years, 7 years in the making. But it's been a cool thing to kind of see that flourish. So as far as the culture goes, that's where that really stems from. And then when we look at programming, I know you and I have had these conversations a lot. We are very triphasic based. I like the simplicity in the model. I like the constant building blocks that you can allow for kids to kind of see but yet build upon. And I think in doing so, it really breaks down movement for student athletes and allows them to understand the importance of movement fluidity. It allows them to understand the importance of range of motion, technique, all the things that I think when you see developing young students or student athletes, things that they may struggle with. We have kids who walk in the weight room, and from a hot minute, you can tell that kid's an athlete and that kid's strong. But obviously, working at the high school level, we don't always get those kids. And so I think the coolest part is when you see those kids have a chance to develop. So once again, getting into the X's and O's, we stay really, really basics with, a lot of very, very simple movements. Obviously, we are a big trap bar program. That's just something that I feel very passionate about as far as the safety of the movement, the positioning of the movement. We do a lot of single leg work, like I said, but all kind of in a triphasic manner. And then I personally, once again, kind of come in that little flavor of yourself, is I really do love cleans. We're a program that does a lot of cleaning, whether it's clean pulls, different aspects of the clean, but really getting into what is it to move weight fast, move weight explosively, and obviously we're thankful to have the space, the equipment to do all these things.
I think space and equipment is obviously like a major like constraining factor for so many of us at the high school level. Like, what does that aspect look like? And even like as recent as today, like having a conversation with our wrestling coach here about like why we are not currently Olympic lifting. Um, sure, like there's plenty of programs that Olympic lift and are successful. There's plenty of programs that don't Olympic lift and are successful. But like with us here at Charlotte Christian, like it's either our kids are backed up against a wall that's covered in like mirrors, or they're backed up against like our offices that are it's literally a wall of glass. So I'm like,
Yep.
look, like that means I got like the four
You're not cleaning.
platforms in the middle of the room are the only ones. But if I got 30 kids in this room and I got four platforms that can actually be able to do a movement, it's not going to be nearly as successful and kind of like a program. Um,
Yep.
so yeah, definitely
Yeah, and
space,
that's
time,
and
all
once
those
and once
constraints.
again, there's obviously, like you said, there's always constraints, and then I think, like, for me, like I said, it's a personal flavor. I always liked cleans, but, like, you talk to some of these guys who've been doing it for a long time. You talk to a lot of these guys who obviously, who have a lot more research, a lot more data than I could ever even begin to imagine, and also have the resources to dive into it. I, I don't think there is one magic formula. I think it's really about finding, what is best for your program and ensuring that your kids are given an opportunity to develop, whatever that is.
Yeah.
As long as obviously it's within the bounds of being safe, as long as it's within the bounds of having good technique, and as long as it's within the bounds of what is performance.
Yeah. So you and I, like, we kind of got output about the same time. I think that you were actually a little bit ahead in the grand scheme of things, but how do you integrate output sensors, output sports, the output hub into your program? And then how are you utilizing all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my biggest goals is to always be one step ahead of whatever program Kyle Jacksic is doing. Um, but I think, kind of going back to it, like, in all seriousness, output. I think, when we looked at our program, one of the things that we had to evaluate is what is going to give us the biggest feedback, top to bottom. Once again, with our groups, 9 to 12, male, female, and I think, there's a lot of amazing resources now and technology out there as far as velocity-based training, giving students data. You have things like Vitruf and Perch and all these things that are great. But I think one of the things that for us set Output apart was our ability and functionality to use it, one, on a daily basis, two, to use it in a variety of different forms. And so what we've started to do is, obviously, with our in-season programs and even with our off-season programs, we're kind of allowing teams to kind of pick a couple different metrics that they want to be able to follow. Obviously, there's metrics that we look at that we try to follow within the room and within the bounds of our program. But, for example, right now, our girls and boys softball and baseball team, they're looking at med ball rotational throws. That is the metric that we use every time they come in the room. And obviously, I may be throwing in a velocity-based movement with output as well. But it's allowed us to kind of monitor our athletes on a daily basis using a certain movement that I think for those groups, they enjoy it. Obviously, I think it's somewhat transferable. They think it's like the biggest thing because it's like, oh, this is me swinging a bat. Like, and if if that's what tickles it for them, hey, then that's what works. So I think one, it can provide a little bit of, kind of ingenuity with what you're doing. It can kind of, add a little spice to your program. But obviously, as we know, it also can drive intent. It also can allow for a focus. It also allows us to obviously look at data of where kids are on a day-to-day basis. And then you can look at obviously progression and development over the course of 4 years. We're now obviously a little over a full year into the output program, and the data that I'm now able to get to my athletic director, to my AT, as well as to my superintendent, who likes to see a lot of things we're doing, is really substantiating and validating for a lot of the things that we're doing and a lot of the progress that we're making. So output has been an absolute game changer from a perception side of kind of development, and then also from the aspect of programming and what we're doing with our kids.
Yeah. Is there anything that you found, like, utilizing the system that, hey, maybe our programming isn't working, or hey, our program really is working, like when you're diving into that data?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were two things. One, I think it kind of goes the opposite in the fact of, like, I needed to get kids to kind of buy in to understand the data. I think we are all naturally creatures of habit. We like what we like. I know exactly what I get every time I go to Chipotle, right? I get the same thing because it's delicious. I love it. Uh, and I think we grow a program, and I had the opportunity to, like I said, to grow our program here at Queensbury with a very old school basic philosophy of, hey, we're going to squat, we're going to trap bar, we're going to clean, we're going to do all these things. It's all percentage based lifting, and kids could see progress really just based off of weights, right? And an improvement of, hey, got stronger. About 5 years ago, we got laser timers. So obviously, once again, that kind of broadened our horizon of things that we were able to test with true validity of really looking at kids' development. Sprint things or things that you and I talked about, things that I was, like I said, for me, I'm still trying to learn and get better at on a daily basis. But now switching the programming, like I said, trying to get those kids to buy into understanding what is velocity-based training. how it can dictate your training has definitely been an educational process that's been really beneficial for our kids to once again say, hey, this is great. Have you seen this new thing that Chipotle offers? You should try that, right? Hey, have you seen this new thing we're now doing in the weight room? Take a step back and understand weights are great, being strong is great, but also there's different metrics that we're now using to measure it. So I think that's been somewhat of a hurdle, is getting our kids in our community to kind of understand the gravity and what that all entails. And then once again, going into programming, there's some things that we've seen that, personally, like I said, we were doing downward med ball slams. I don't know if that was a great marker for what, some of our teams were doing based off of what they were looking for. And so we've kind of had to adjust a little bit of what we do. But I also think that there are certain metrics, like I said, with my zero block program, we do a Tuesday CMJ, a Thursday repeated jump, based off of a sprint, and we're seeing direct correlations to not just improvement, but also just output, right? No pun intended, of what kids are being able to do based on those numbers. So I think it is kind of cool for our kids to then see that, for them to understand it. But obviously, as you and I kind of spoke, to have that data just to say, hey, we're either developing or we need to kind of relook at a program and make some adjustments.
Yeah. I think as soon as you're able to put a number on something, no matter if a kid really, really cares or not, there's this beautiful thing, especially in high school kids, called peer pressure of like that.
Yep.
There's just instant competition every single time. And then when you're able to have like multiple stations going at the same time and doing like a whole load of different things, but if it's just like, hey, every single Tuesday, like we're coming in, we're doing a counter movement jump, like that's going to be the competition of the day. Because the more
Yep.
that, and I've kind of talked about with our coaches here, is like we want to be an extension of the bench. Like the weight room is just as much as part of your practice as your stick work, as your conditioning at the end, et cetera, et cetera. Like let that be an extension. So I think as soon as like you can put some like real like hands-onness to it, and then the educational side of stuff for the kids as well, it is awesome. And I think kids just eat that up, especially if you're trying to create buy-in in a new program. So like you said, like you're the first sports performance coordinator there. And then like for me, like coming into a new job, like I do stuff a lot differently than the last person. So I had to come
Yep.
in and say like, hey, like this is what we're going to focus on. This is what we're going to track. Like this is where we're going to go. And and the kids certainly seem to enjoy it.
Yeah. And I think once again, and this is obviously, obviously, as you know, I'm sold on output, but I think what also it's done is it's allowed us to say, hey, we have a group of student athletes who are quick, right? Who are fast. So it's maybe speed is their tool. They may find competition in their max velos, or they may find competition in their acceleration numbers. But also for us, providing opportunity to do velocity-based training, where maybe we have some bigger kids who, velocity um, is not their metric when it comes to what they get excited about when it comes to sprinting. But hey, maybe moving weight fast is. And then obviously, like I said, you allow for some of our other kids who, hey, maybe I'm not the fastest or I'm not the strongest, but man, oh man, like that kid can rotate like no other kid alive. You know what I mean? Like we have some kids who, their torque, their engines are bigger right now than their frames. Just because they're young, maybe they're a little underdeveloped. And so you can see it in certain markers and certain measurements. And for us, that's what output has allowed us to do, is have different markers, have different points of emphasis, that hey, we're gonna monitor maybe just these few things, but it doesn't mean that we can't go kind of outside that scope just to find points of competition, and also find points of kids saying, hey, this is something that kid is really good at. Maybe we now can apply them in this sport or in this position in the sport to hopefully be successful.
Yeah. Sports science is amazing. And it's only getting better and better too.
That's like right now, like once again, like I know you have an assistant. Like I wish I had more time to truly understand the data, because I'm not going to pretend that I understand all of it, but also to really dive into even just the data that I do understand, and put out metrics. I constantly put out stuff to our coaches. Some coaches are in it and they give feedback and we have really great conversations. Some coaches don't. So obviously that kind of just falls on me to ensure that at least there's a baseline of understanding with the athletes of where to go and where we should be progressing.
Yeah.
But
No,
yeah,
that's
sports
awesome.
science, man. What a field.
Yeah. Well, like we want to take a turn kind of like with this series. Like we've had conversations kind of like in our friend group too, that coaches are people too, and we should kind of like
Mm.
see that as such. So I like to take a step back. Let's take off the Coach Martin hat and kind of like go through a little bit more of the John side of stuff, or J Mart as most
Yeah,
know
yeah.
him. Um, so you grew up in a family of coaches. Your brother
Yep.
coaches at a high level. Your mom was a longtime coach. How was seeing your mother kind of like define her life growing up through coaching, and did that play a part in you wanting to do what you do?
Yeah, I mean, so one, I'm the youngest. So I think one being the baby, I always kind of got my way, right? As any baby in a family does. No, but on a quick serious note, I think that aspect of I'm an oops baby as well. I was dragged around to every event that my brother and sister competed in. I was thankful to be there. My sister was a Division I athlete. My brother competed for the U.S. Olympic team. And it was a cool aspect to kind of just follow them around and get an understanding of what athletics can look like at a high level. And when it comes to my mother in particular, she actually almost gave birth to me on a field hockey field. Simply to the fact that she was coaching. There was a game that day and she wasn't willing to kind of step off. The game finished. She was in the hospital within 15 minutes and I was out 5 minutes later. So, there's this, kind of for me, I think athletics has always been a draw. Sports has always been a draw. I think there's a side of it for me that, I think everybody has a moment in their life, a hinge, a linchpin or a hinge point, if you will, where, certain things define who you are. Athletics has always been around that. And so for me, coaching in particular has always been something that I feel like I've had a little inside scoop on. And I think in doing so, for me, my mom and my brother are both in the field hockey world coaching. My sister still has a hand in it as well. For me, kind of finding the realm of sport performance has allowed me to still do that and still coach and still be part of athletics, which I love, but also do it in my own light and also kind of create my own path of what it is. So my family has had a huge impact on who I am and kind of the person who I've kind of grown to be, if you will. Not to say that I'm a grown up in any way, shape, or form, but I think that's a huge underlying factor of how I just identify as a human.
Yeah. Yeah, it's what you're exposed to. Like
Yeah. And
if
my
you
mom was
see,
ruthless, man.
yeah,
When it came down to it, like if you wanted to ask to go to a friend's house, you were not asking my mom. Like she'd cut your head off in a heartbeat just with her stare.
yeah,
So
yeah, it's funny because my wife and I'll have conversations a lot of she's like, man, you're like go 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 all the time. Like I grew up on the same property as my grandfather, who like his job was on the property. He owned a machine
mm,
shop that was on the property. Like we were dog breeders. Like we heated all our houses with firewood. Like I saw him get up every single day and just go. So it's just like
yeah.
in my nature of like, hey, like there's gonna be times that you're just gonna have to go do it. But if you don't really see that like at a young age, like people sometimes that's like overlooked. Like we talk about genetics and like in sports performance, like can you out train genetics? It's also can you out train or what do your habits create for you as well? So it's
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And I think as
definitely
you know, like coaching in athletics, like I tell our kids all the time, like it's that Nick Saban quote where it's like, it takes what it takes. You know what I mean? There is no magic formula. You know what I mean? Like if you may be beneficial of genetics or the beneficiary of genetics, and you may just be good at something, but to be successful still just takes what it takes. And it takes going. And like you said, that kind of go mentality, the hard work that there's no mixing or mashing that with anything else besides it's just what it is.
yeah. So it's funny because the next question, and I always like to ask this whenever I'm in interviews with people, like looking at jobs or like just trying to find out more. So if we take strength and conditioning and like let's even take athletics out of your life, like erase it from your brain, you never really
Yeah.
knew it, you were never really exposed to it. What would you see yourself doing?
So I've been asked this a few times because so we have a group of kids who are part of our production team that like go around and they do interviews with teachers and like they ask questions on a daily basis. It's really fun. But this question actually came up a couple of weeks ago and I had to like kind of deeply think about it because I've just never thought about doing anything outside of athletics, and even outside of school. Like, but my dad was a high school principal. My mom was a teacher and a coach. So even just the nature of school in itself has always just been kind of inbred in me. But if I had to step outside of that realm, I always tell people I would love to be the person who travels around the world and does roller coaster like ratings. Like, like there's like theme park books that you can I love roller coasters, like entertaining as hell. And it's like, I want to be the person who just like, I'm going to ride it another time. I want to give you guys like a good rating. You know what I mean? Like what a cool job just to go ride around, hey, new roller coaster. I'll test that one out. Like, I don't know. I just always thought like, I found out that was a gig at one point in life. And I was like, where is that at the job fair? Like nobody ever knew that was a thing. And like, what profession do you even get in? Is that marketing? Is that like, where are you even going that finds that job? But when I found it, I was like, you know what, that would be cool as hell. Just go around and just travel around the theme parks and ride roller coasters.
Yeah. I never took you as a roller coaster guy. See, I'm not a roller coaster guy because I think I'm always thinking that I'm going to be the person that's on the news that's like in the hospital or better yet dead because like I was the one that fell out. Like that's what
Yeah.
goes through which
No, I'm strap me
garbage.
into it again, baby. Let's go.
Yeah, rile it up. That's good. People can send John some roller coaster recommendations, and maybe we can start planning some trips.
Let's do it. Can we start a sidebar, a
Yeah,
conversation about, hey, what are the best roller coasters that people have been on? Because I've been on a decent amount. Like I said, I had the opportunity to kind of travel around with my brother and sister when I was a kid. So many roller coasters. So many roller coasters.
was your mom consistently yelling at you to get off of the roller coaster?
Nah, she didn't give it. She'd go as long as she didn't
Yeah.
get a phone call. She didn't care. Like
Okay.
it was a survival of the fittest, baby. In
Yeah.
the summertime, my mom was that parent who would just lock you outside the house. The
Yeah.
garden hose, if you need it's on, you figure it out. And like at lunchtime, she would just set out a peanut butter and jelly and just reclose the door.
It's funny just seeing like the nature of people just come out of just like what had happened earlier in their lives that has like made them today. So let's go back
Oh
into
my
kind of
God,
like your
I'm
current
sure
life.
if I trauma per se.
What is your way to decompress and kind of like balance your life currently?
So for me, I think once again, we had this conversation about being go, go, go. And I think as a teacher, as a coach, I think there always is that little itch inside of you that feels like, hey, I can do this better. Hey, I can work more at this. And I think in doing so, for me, it's a big socialing task. You know what I mean? You're constantly having conversations with people. You're constantly interacting with others. You're constantly trying to navigate personality types, conflicts to ensure that this ship, or whatever analogy you want to use, is cruising smoothly and effectively. So for me personally, the big kind of decompression for me is to kind of step away from a lot of that, and to really have a little more kind of me time, if you will. I do love a good show or a good movie. I definitely like I said, the idea of kind of sitting down and kind of, once again, stepping away from socialization, just being engulfed in a good story. But I also really into kind of like woodworking, home improvement, DIY. That's been a big thing of mine for a while. Once again, we are our parents essentially in the end. That was my dad. Like he was a big, we built a barn when we were a kid, and he had a workshop, and now I'm kind of falling into that same niche as well. And it's kind of a nice, like, kind of, I go out to the workshop, especially this time of year in New York. You start a fire, you're out there for the course of the day, just kind of doing things. My kids will come out and visit, and we'll have lunch out there, and I get to teach them things. But it's also kind of a nice decompression of, there's no pressure. There's nobody having those conversations about what's going on. It's just kind of an opportunity for you to be in your own head and come up with ideas of things to do, and like I said, just kind of have that me time, if you will.
Yeah. Working with no timeline is always
Yeah.
a good way to just kind of like remove yourself, like finding that
Yep.
niche that it's a project, like people paint, people do puzzles, like sure, like
Yep.
there's so much timeline in our lives, especially like in coaching where like we know that, hey, like my warm-up's got to take 4 minutes because that's the time that I have allotted. So then when we
Yep.
can really just like completely remove ourselves and say like, hey, this is something that I want to work on, and we have no timeline, and it's just it is what it is and it does what it does, I think is a great way to like really flip the coaching card around in order to just, hey, like my coaching hat is not on right now.
Yep.
I think
Yeah,
that's
for
I
sure.
think that's some great insight. So to just kind of like wrap things up, I like to get some quick hit questions, more
Let's
about you
go.
as a person. So we
Yep, I'm
we, we
ready.
got 8 of them to fire them up.
Okay.
Goal is to answer as fast as possible.
Okay. All
Gut
right. As fast
reaction.
as possible.
Yeah.
All right.
Gut reaction. Instant.
Yeah.
Favorite
Yep.
kind of music.
Like classic rock. Like hit me with like, and I say classic rock, like Foo Fighters, Red Hot Chili Peppers, like a little bit more like grunge, alternative type rock.
Okay. Favorite pizza topping.
Bacon.
Mm, mm.
Don't do that. Everybody loves
So
bacon. Don't
so
even.
you just so you just were in Buffalo, New York. I think our
Yep.
friendship hangs in the balance in the answer of this question. You're getting
Yep.
buffalo wings, ranch or blue cheese.
Blue cheese.
Okay, that's fair. All right, I guess we can stay friends. Early bird or night owl?
Early bird, no doubt about it.
Same here. Dream vacation destination.
This is tough. I have to say Disney. I've always been a Disney guy. We went to Disney a bunch as a kid. There's something about it for me as a child, and my inner child. Not that I'm a grown up, like I said. I love Disney. Love it.
Okay. You can only watch one sport and one sports team for the rest of your life. Who is it?
One sport and one sport team. The rest of my life. Green Bay Packers football.
Interesting. Especially growing up.
Yeah, but Brett
Yeah.
Favre. When I was a kid, yeah, Brett Favre was like
Okay.
the dude.
Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
was it.
That makes
Yep.
sense. What's your
Yep.
guilty pleasure?
Am I allowed to say that on here? Um, my guilty pleasure, in all seriousness, is got to be double Oreos.
Gotta be what?
I can live in the house. What's that?
It's what? You broke up a little bit on that one.
Double stuffed Oreos.
Double stuffed Oreos. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry,
I think
double
I,
stuffed
I think I'm
Oreos
I think I'm in the
is where it's
boat
at.
that single stuff Oreos should just not be a thing. Like double stuff should just be like
They
that's
shouldn't
that's what
exist.
an
Double
Oreo
stuff
is.
should just be Oreos.
Yeah. Because it's really just
Yeah,
chocolate cookies
and
if
I'm
it's
going to be honest with you.
regular.
Like, yeah, the family pack of double stuffed Oreos,
Yeah.
family of one right
Yeah.
here. I could eat the whole thing by myself.
Yeah. I think it's probably three sittings all in all for me if it's a family pack. Maybe I feel like just like the three lines, like that's safe. Um, so you talked about it a little bit.
It's nice, but every once in a while you'll finish the rack. You're like, "Eeh."
Yeah. Yeah, it's not great, but it's a guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
So you talked about TV shows, movies.
Yep.
What's the best TV show slash movie? You can answer both a TV show and a movie that you've seen in the past year.
In the past year?
Yeah.
Ooh, well, that's tough. The past year, because I'm a huge Game of Thrones guy.
Okay.
Um, TV show in the past year. Masters of the Air. It's the new one on Apple TV
Okay.
Plus. Very good. Very good. Movie in the past year that I've seen. Man, that's tough because I do like movies. I watch a lot of movies. I'm gonna have to come back to that one. That's gonna have to be a pass for me. I'm gonna stick to my Masters of the Air and Game of Thrones.
Okay.
I
Two
can't.
good
There's so
things.
many movies. There's so,
Yeah.
and it's like
I
it's
mean,
hard to because like there's the good movies are not movies I've seen in the past year. I've not
okay.
seen a really good movie in the past year.
I will say I did go see Dune Part Two, and as you can imagine,
See,
I am a nerd. So
yep.
Dune Part Two was phenomenal.
See, it's on my list, but I just haven't had a chance to go to the theater to see it.
Yeah,
Like that's my
it's
big thing. Like
definitely a see in theater kind of thing. It's an
okay, so like
immersive experience.
see now I just watched the first one for the second time because I wanted to be ready for the second one. Like I'm in, like I'm locked in. I'm step for step with you. I just have not seen it in theater yet.
So we'll have to get a quick little interview, maybe a 1 minute, 60-second review from John Martin after he sees Dune Part Two.
Let's do it.
Okay. John, man, I want to thank you for your realness and thank you for being a part of this series, being the first one. We couldn't tee it up any better. Before we go, where can coaches get in contact with you or follow along with what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, for me, you and I have talked about this. I'm not awesome at social media, especially when it comes to kind of like putting things out there. We do a lot just for the kids, mainly. But obviously, if anybody has any, questions or wants to be in contact with me, obviously, email is always an easy way to get a hold of me. Otherwise, Twitter and Instagram. My Twitter is at QBY Coach Martin. Instagram is at QBY Strength. You know what I mean? So obviously follow along there. Obviously, you guys can always DM me if there's any questions. But like I said, that's for the most part where we operate social media wise. And I'm an open book. I got nothing to hide. I've stolen everything that I do. So, with that being the case, I'm happy to either answer questions or defer to the people who I know have the answers.
Yeah, for sure. John, can't thank you enough for spending time with us, and looking forward
Yeah,
to
man, my pleasure.
connecting more and learning more. For everyone that's tagged along, we thank you for giving us your time and your support of Output Sports. Excited to see you again for the next Inside the Room feature. For now, goodbye.